All right. Hello. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to Letterform Lectures online edition. My name is Grendel. I'm Education Director at Letterform Archive, which is also the home of Type West, our School of Type Design. And we have an international audience today, so please type in where you're coming from in the chat so that we know how many people attended from where. It's always interesting. And if you have questions for the speaker, just remember, put them in the Q&A, and we'll deal with them at the end of the talk. So I want to first give a huge shout out to Skilla Zaccolini, who is the mastermind in the background of this lecture series. So thank you again, Skilla, for all your hard work. Okay. Reminder that the pandemic is far from over and that the most efficient and easy way to prevent its spread is by masking. So please mask up when you're indoors and around other people. Okay, thank you very much. Let's stay safe, everybody. Letterform Archive is the home of Type West School of Type Design, and we have a slew of great lectures and workshops for you, online and in person. So check out our website for more details on that. Super important, strike through. Come join us in person for the party of the year as we celebrate the opening of our second exhibition, Strike Through, which is curated by Silas Monroe and Stephen Coles. This timely exhibition of protest graphics will make you want to grab a stencil or some collage material and whip up a couple hard-hitting posters to take to the streets, because Lucifer knows we need it right now. In case you don't think you have those skills, no worries. We have your back. Internationally known radical artist Fabiana Rodriguez is going to lead a workshop on art and social justice graphics that you can sign up for. It's one day only, in person, September 17th. Sign up now. And we also have another in-person workshop around the corner starring Paul Herrera, who is the infamous apprentice of the legendary Father Kaddish. This workshop is happening on July 30th and 31st, so sign up now. It's coming up very soon. By the way, all our in-person workshops require appropriate masking and physical distancing, and we have great ventilation and high-grade air purifiers, which hopefully filter out all those pesky viruses. We have a couple other online workshops coming up. We have our very own Stephen Coles and Christopher Sly's crash course in type selection. So everything you wanted to know about choosing type, but we're afraid to ask. So this top team of type experts will get you started on the path to great type choices. And they'll also give you tips on how to organize and better use your type library. So this is a workshop for beginners and pros alike. We also have the basics of designing flourishes. So our popular instructor, Lin Yun, is returning to school us in the art of flourishing, which, contrary to popular belief, is not a result of happy accidents. It's all planned. In this workshop, you'll learn how to identify the basic elements of flourishing and dissect what makes good flourishing pleasing to the eye. And finally, you will combine these elements to create your own designs. Do not miss this one. Okay, our Letterform Lecture series continues on Tuesday, July 26th, when the aforementioned Paul Herrera will be in town for this special in-person Letterform Lecture. We are returning to the SF Public Library for the first time in over 2 years. So join us, please, in the lovely Carrette Auditorium for this exciting talk about his inspiration, his process, and the challenges of recreating the Trajan inscription in slate. This will be live streamed and recorded for our international audience. Okay, so for more information on upcoming Letterform lectures, our salon series, and any other workshops and events as they all happen, go to letarc.org/events. Better yet, become a Letterform Archive member. Stay in the loop, get cool perks, and help keep great lectures like this one today going. Okay, finally, Be sure to follow us on Instagram to stay on top of upcoming events and programs and see cool stuff. There's our handles right there. All right, welcome to Letterform Lectures 2022. They are co-presented by Letterform Archive and the SFPL. Letterform Archive is a nonprofit institution housing over 80,000 works of graphic design history. They just keep coming in. We are dedicated to the art and the craft of the letterform. And we'd like to thank Adobe for generously sponsoring the video recording of this series. So you can view all Letterform lectures online soon after they happen, thanks to Adobe. Just check our website, letterformarchive.org. Okay, this brings us to the main event, an exploration of Hong Kong type. So I am thrilled to introduce type designer, scholar, and co-founder of the Trilingua Design Studio, Adonian Chan. He's going to walk us through the history and subsequent reincarnation of Hong Kong type while indulging us in some of Hong Kong's calligraphic secrets. His book on Hong Kong Beiwei, and forgive me if I butchered that, Adonian, Bayway calligraphy and type design took multiple awards at the Hong Kong Publishing Festival. And he's also an award-winning type designer and co-curator of Hong Kong's largest design festival. And he told me an interesting story about his name, Adonian, which apparently his parents gave him in reference to the god Adonis. However, the Japanese translation of it means a bowl of rice or something to that effect. So you figure it out today. Is he Adonis or is he a bowl of rice? Okay, we are honored to introduce Adonian Chan. Take it away.
Thank you, Grendel. Okay, let me try to share my screen. Yeah, actually, some of my friends, they would try to just call me Adobe, so it probably is easier to pronounce for them. So can you see my screen and can you hear me clearly?
I can.
All right. So yeah, good evening, everyone, and good morning in case you are tuning from other places. I'm currently in Hong Kong. It's 9 a.m. in the morning. So thanks Letterform Archive for inviting me to do this sharing. So yeah, I'm a type designer and also design director of Trilingua Design, and also I'm a musician as well. So, but today I would like to share a few of my projects with Trilingua, and most importantly, 2 Chinese type design projects that I've been working for the past few years. So Trilingua Design is a multidisciplinary design company that's based in Hong Kong, which I co-founded with my classmate, Chris Choi, right after we graduated from Polytechnic University Visual Communication in 2010. So our work encompassed brand identity to installation design, spatial design, publication design. From the very beginning, we have been trying to make Chinese typography, lettering, and type design as our primary focus. And we often utilize Chinese characters as the primary graphic element. So during my study in university, I've noticed most designers would shy away from using Chinese characters as the main visual, and even try to reduce the font size so it would not jeopardize the design. The bias towards Chinese characters are totally understandable, as there weren't many high quality Chinese fonts in the market, and some kind of look dated. However, Chinese characters has a rich tradition, and there are countless marvelous calligraphers from every dynasty, and the magnificent woodblock and movable type craftsmen. So could we make better use of this splendid culture resource and utilize onto the designs that would fit the needs of today? Having this as our ethos, we have been trying to use Chinese characters as the major visual element if the project see fit.
Adonian, I have a quick question. Are you changing slides right now? Or oh, here we go. Perfect. Never mind.
Yeah. So our very first attempt was using Chinese as the key graphic element, was the visual identity for an arts exhibition series called 1+1 back in, yes, more than 10 years ago, back in 2011. So it was an artistic exchange program for artists between Hong Kong, Taiwan, China, and Macau. There were 16 artists involved. For the key visual, I've created an icon for each artist by merging their English initials with their Chinese surname. Since Hong Kong is a bilingual city, we often would mix Cantonese and English in our daily conversation. The mix of Chinese and English characters might be manifestations that is quite unique to Hong Kong. And I also carefully drew the Song style character one, meaning one, for the invitation card. We would also draw our own logo type and or lettering for most of our projects. And in another project, which we designed the packaging for one of the oldest soy sauce manufacturers in Hong Kong called Yuwo. We have drawn an extended Song style typeface for the product names. So they are applied on the soy sauce packaging labels. We will also occasionally use calligraphy for our projects. We have designed the brand identity for an avant-garde art gallery called Empty Gallery in Hong Kong. They had also put together a series of experimental and free improvisation concerts, which we also designed the posters for them. And one of my favorite designers, this poster I designed for a group. Actually, I don't know how to pronounce the name of the group. Probably is Sam Yan, 3 people. I don't know. The name itself is already very graphical, which hence we interpreted the name with a calligraphy style that's inspired by Qing dynasty calligrapher called Gam Long. He is a very unique calligrapher. His style is almost entirely depart from the tradition and very creative and very graphical indeed. And apart from commission design projects, we will also design installations occasionally. And in this installation called Vanish, Reincarnated, we borrowed, actually this installation was in Taipei. We borrowed 800 kilograms of used metal type from Taipei's Wuxing Yaxing foundry, Yaxing Juzihong. We melted the metal type at the one end of the panel, which is the very crucial regenerating process of recasting new metal type from deteriorated old metal types. So aside from these, the projects that we do with Trilingua, I also initiate my own type design and research project. But before sharing this type design project, I would like to provide a little bit background information for Chinese type design. So Chinese type design might be a novel vocation, but majority of the time, the work is in fact very extremely mundane and tedious. Why? Unlike other languages, Chinese is an logographic language, which commonly use characters alone as up to 6,000 characters. And in some character set standard like Taiwan's Big 5203 is even up to 13,060 characters. To be frank, most characters in the big five character set either ancient characters that might be obsolete or characters for probably rare surnames or names of remote places. So most of the people, including me, many of these characters I would not know how to pronounce. So if the 13,060 characters is not scary enough, there are actually two standard character set in Chinese written language. Traditional Chinese is used in Hong Kong and Taiwan, and simplified Chinese is used in China, Singapore, and Malaysia. Moreover, kanji is also a variant of traditional Chinese used in Japanese written language. So in Chinese, characters are constituted by radicals and strokes. And although there are many shared radicals, there are around 300 radicals alone and around 900 components. So Chinese characters do not have a standardized proportion. Some characters might be wide, like this character they, which mean earth on the left. And some characters might be elongated, like this character Dou on the right, which means plentiful. Characters with the least number of strokes have too much negative space. And like on the left is yap, meaning one, while characters with a great deal of strokes have to cram into a box. For the character on the right, there are 48 strokes, and it's a funny character. I don't know how to pronounce this character. So it's basically the character Long, which means dragon, and multiplied by 3 times, meaning a flying dragon. I don't understand why our ancestors have to invent such a new character to depict the action of a dragon. But these type of characters became a headache for type designers. And they probably ran out of ideas of how to create new characters. So they sometimes would just simply multiply the same radical for several times to form a new character. When a character multiplied by a few times, it literally means more. For instance, this radicals on the right, sorry, means water, and when you multiply by 3 times, it means a wide expanse of water. And this character is a name of a type of noodle in China. Luckily, this type of monstrous characters were not included into the big 5 character set, which made life a little easier. The development of movable type has standardized the capricious structures into a square. For obvious reasons, this made typesetting a lot more efficient. At the same time, this also made type design a lot more challenging, as now characters with extreme structures have to all fit into an identical square. And characters like, and these 5 characters, they all share the same radical, which means wood. And for instance, the second character Lam, which means wood, and the middle Sum, which means force. They all share this, although they all share the same radical, but they all have a very different proportion. And each character requires a niggling fine-tuning of proportion and weight. And this process has to be repeated for 6,000 times. or more. So an average Chinese font usually takes around 2 to 5 designers around a year for production alone. This massive workload entails a considerable production budget. So that's why Chinese type design scene has been stagnant in the few past decades. But until the online crowdfunding became popularized, and this gave independence to independent type designer means to fund the production costs. And this mean of crowdfunding also gave me the opportunity to develop a typeface and research project called Beiwei Zansyu. So this is a type design project, but actually it was inspired by a significant incident in Hong Kong. In 2006, when I was in my first year of university studying visual communication, in the same year, the Star Ferry Pier in Victoria Harbour has been demolished to make room for land reclamation. Although the pier did not have a very long history, it was built in 1957. It was an important landmark for many Hong Kong people as it was one of the most frequent and cheapest way to cross the Victoria Harbour. And the modest unassuming architecture design and the adjacent City Hall was seen as one of the finest examples of Bauhaus architecture in Hong Kong. The event has sparked a wave of social movement on both the issue of heritage conservation and the demand for a democratic process of policy making. Anyhow, this is a catalyst to heckle myself what a designer can do amidst this shrouding boom. So when we think of Hong Kong, one immediate impression that come to mind might be the gigantic shop signs that appears to be hovering up above the city. And this has actually been endangered since 2010 due to a policy made to regulate structures of shop signs. This set of photos is of the same street. On the left is taken in 2016, on the right is taken in 2019. As you can see, the majority of the signs have been demolished. And another set of photo of the same street, which on the right is, on the left is taken in the 90s, and on the right is taken in 2019. And you can see the majority, these precious artifacts of culture has been almost wiped out entirely. And this triggered me to reflect, how can I proactively respond to this phenomenon? One interesting observation is that the majority calligraphy signs in Hong Kong during the 40s to 80s has a consistent calligraphic style, which is not of the so-called mainstream calligraphy style. And this style is not found anywhere in China or Taiwan, except Hong Kong and occasionally some Chinatown. And this style is very bold, energetic, and rhythmic. The structure resembles a particular style of Beiwei, which calligraphers would generalize it as Beiwei, but I coined it as Hong Kong Beiwei in order to be more accurate and specific. So Hong Kong Beiwei has gone through mainly 3 stages of significant transformation throughout its very long history. Hong Kong Beiwei, it could be traced back to Southern and Northern dynasty, which is in the 5th century. Interestingly, the Northern dynasty who invented Beiwei style were not ethnically Chinese, but nomads that admire Han culture. It was the clash of cultures that germinated this unorthodox Beiwei style. At the first glance, Beiwei might seem clumsy and unrefined, yet it unleashed a robust energy that wasn't found in orthodox calligraphy, as it was not confined by traditional perception of beauty. Uh, a little background information. The development of Chinese characters had gone through several stages of scripts. Beiwei is in between the transition of Daisu, uh, a type of script, to Kaisu. So Beiwei, so they share the attributes of both scripts. Beiwei is a general name for a variety of styles and and applications. The most renowned type of Beiwei is 轴像記, which means the inscription of the record of statues. They could be found besides the Buddhist statues in Longmun grottos in Lokyang. The other type of inscription is on tombstones. The style is more fluid and looks more like kaisu. And the third type is inscriptions on huge slabs of stone on mountains. And due to the coarse surface to the stone, the strokes are often relatively rounded. Bayway has been neglected for centuries as it was regarded as unorthodox. It was not until Qing Dynasty when calligraphers hoped to revitalize the stagnant calligraphy scene. They revisited Bayway in the hope to introduce new elements to the calligraphy. So each calligrapher has a different approach. Some calligraphers try to identically replicate Beiwei. They were able to masterfully maneuver the soft brush to draw harsh and rigid strokes. However, this approach lacks creativity as it is merely just repeating the parts. And some modern were able to bend the rules, and one of the most prominent figure was Jiu Jihim. He was able to extract the essence of Beiwei and gave a new life to it. So on the left is Beiwei inscription, and on the right is an example of how Jiu Jihim interpreted. He did not forcibly replicate the property of stone inscriptions, but to honor the soft and fluid touch of calligraphy, while he also tried to infuse the peculiar structures of Beiwei. And this style he invented has inspired the generations to come. In the 40s, many calligraphers and scholars from China has migrated to Hong Kong due to war or political turmoil, and which the Beiwei trend in Qing Dynasty was able to continue in Hong Kong. Calligraphers were able to make a living through writing calligraphy shop signs, and also for business card or even book cover letterings. There's a very famous calligrapher and Chinese doctor called Ao Gong. He was among the most influential and prolific calligrapher in the time. He has left behind many shop signs that are regarded as Hong Kong Beiwei. He was an he admired the Qing dynasty calligrapher Jiu Qihim a lot. So he was once again able to reinterpret his iteration of Beiwei, which became even more stable and bold. So on the left is are Ao Gingong's calligraphy and the shop signs, and on the right is calligraphy done by Jiu Qihim, and you can see how Ao Gingong were able to reinterpret Jiu Qihim's style. So it was in the context of in Hong Kong that Beiwei became a very functional design that serves as a logotype for shops and businesses. The bold strokes made it very outstanding and easy to read from the very crowded cityscape. The calligraphies become the brand identity, so it was applied, of course, in various applications like receipts and also like this plastic shopping bags. There are actually many other calligraphers who also did a lot of Beiwei, and they were very prolific as well. For instance, this is a name card drew by a lesser-known calligrapher called Chuck Siu-hang. But unfortunately, there's very little record of him. So although he has done a lot of business card, but unfortunately, I cannot find a portrait of him. This demonstrates how flexible Beiwei is, as it could apply in gigantic shop signs, and it can also apply on small applications like business card, or even caption size copywritings for advertisements. So to confront the extinction of Hong Kong Beiwei, as a designer, I think the most proactive thing to do might be to properly document it, which I wrote a book with my partner, Ivy Zhe, about the history and Beiwei's value. This book was published in 2018. And I think the most important aspect is also to rejuvenate the design into a typeface so it could fit the needs of today. To my surprise, the book has gained a lot of attention and even won a grand award from the Hong Kong Publishing Biennial. To be honest, as a designer, I've never thought of winning a publishing award, so this is very encouraging. So the modernization of Hong Kong Beiwei to digital type wasn't easy, as it requires a full understanding before I can reinterpret and modernize it. One approach I stress a lot is I don't want to create a nostalgic calligraphic typeface, but I want to modernize it. The modernization means that I have to honor the medium. I have to eliminate the texture of calligraphy and to honor the sleek property of Bezier curve. I need to know exactly how the forms of strokes are created by the pressure of stroke in order to know how to simplify it. At the early stage of design, I would use calligraphy. I would use a brush to write out the characters. This allows me to have a better sense of how to organize the strokes in a character. Then I will move on to hand sketch, which I can draw a more detailed outline. However, the calligraphy and sketches only serves as a guideline. I would draw the character from scratch on a software called Glyphs. So I would like to expound a little bit on the attributes of Zansyu. So Zansyu is a distinctive typeface. It has many unique attributes, and I guess one immediate impression is it is very it has extremely bold strokes, which made it look very loud and confident. Usually, a Chinese typeface only consists of one style of stroke design for the two ends of a stroke. But I deliberately include diverse variables to make it more lively. And the top and the bottom of a stroke have a different curvature, which make it more looks dynamic, but at the same time stable. So negative space in Chinese type design is actually one of the most important elements. The treatment has to be visually balanced, but not mathematically identical. This character teen, which means farm, is a perfect example to demonstrate how to maneuver the negative space. A perfectly spaced character actually would look stagnant and dull, but a visually balanced character would look lively and humane. One of the most important stroke design that made this Zansyu typeface unique is probably the robust peat-lag stroke, the diagonal strokes. It is what made Zansyu stand out from other typeface. And usually the tip of these diagonal strokes are the ends are pointy, but in the case of Zansyu, uh, it's very bold and thick. And also another distinctive feature is the sickle shaped stroke, which is usually very pointy and short in other typefaces. So although Zansyu is actually still under production, as I mentioned, that because Chinese typeface usually take a very long time to produce, uh, occasionally I will apply to the projects we work on. And this is a shop sign logo type I designed for a mass shop in Hong Kong called Wai Zao. And another example is uh, brand identity design for a modern Chinese restaurant called Old Bailey, which locates in Dai Gun in Hong Kong. And the beautiful interior was actually designed by the architect herself. And although the initial design brief is only to design the brand identity, but I also took the initiative to also design the furnitures, which is a modern take of Ming Dynasty furnitures. I have also revamped the brand identity for an old dry seafood company in near my home called Lei Sang. And actually, I used to run a restaurant, and luckily, it's we're closed because that's too much work. And in the restaurant, I have designed the dessert with my chef and using this character, which is Zeng, which means very good. And I also try to expand the limit and use it on sound installation, which I made in 2015 for a design festival called Detour. So I used the guitar pickup to amplify the the electric circuit noise in Beiwei neon light. And a friend of mine, a programmer, has made a trigger that could control the intensity of the flickering light. And each light is tuned into a different pitch, so it acts as a noise instrument. I would like to share a short clip of the installation. Yeah. Designing Zansyu was a very long and tedious process, and it seems never ending. And throughout the years, I've been trying to continually to refine it. As I said, Chinese character set has a very enormous character set, so the lowest requirement for functioning typeface is around 5,000 to 6,000 characters. And my target is actually to kickstart a crowdfunding within this year to support the production costs. I think one surprising phenomenon that I did not expect is um, somehow Beiwei became a movement that many people began to draw their own Beiwei. That includes designers and also to illustrators, and which I'm very surprised to see that even there's a very famous Japanese illustrator who used the 自由 uh, from my typeface, which means freedom, on one of his illustrations. So for the second part, I would like to share another project called Hong Kong Type, which is one of the, it's not the earliest, but one of the earliest set of Chinese metal type in history. So Hong Kong Type was actually a commission project by Open Print Shop in Hong Kong for an exhibition called Between the Lines at the Hong Kong Heritage Museum 2 years ago. The exhibition highlight is a metal type called Hong Kong Type, which is led by a missionary, a British Christian missionary called Samuel Dyer. It was produced in Hong Kong Anglo-Chinese College between 1847 to 1857. It took them 10 years to produce this metal typeface. So back in the days, the only way to print a book is either to acquire a complete set of metal type from other foundries or to produce your own. And in the case for the London Missionary Society, their imperative task was to preach Christianity through a Chinese Bible. So wood block printing was the prevailing printing technology. However, wood block wears out quickly and hence is inefficient for mass production. Metal type was the state-of-art printing technology. And of course, it was more durable compared with wood block type and a lot more efficient in the printing process. It was a promising technology to disseminate the Bible. However, Samuel Dyer, they were not financially supported by the society, and they had to self-finance through funding and donations. Producing a Chinese font is no easy task, even with today's software technology. So I'm totally amazed by their determination to pull off such unprecedented undertaking in 165 years ago. This is a ludicrous example of Hong Kong Type. It is a book for locals to learn English. The pronunciation of the English was entirely substituted by Chinese. I would try you to read you a line, so see if you can understand what I'm talking about. 好乜字 easy. Do you know what I'm talking about? I guess I guess it's important to understand. So what I just said is it means how much each. So they translated to 好乜字 easy. It's a horrible way to learn English. I bet no one could communicate with such English. So Hong Kong Type sounds authoritative, but to no surprise, it wasn't actually preserved in Hong Kong. And I'm certain that none of us had ever heard of it until this exhibition, because it was not known until Open Print Shop's director, Young. She encountered a person called Ronald Stu, who's chairman of the foundation Type Foundry in Holland, where he discovered the complete set of Hong Kong type copper matrix in a museum archive. In 1855, John Hoffman, a professor of sinology at Leiden University, he recommended to the Academy of Science to acquire the Chinese letters to able to publish Chinese and Japanese texts. And Hoffman, he found that Hong Kong type is one of the most beautiful Chinese font. And luckily, they bought the font. Otherwise, this precious piece of artifact will be forever lost. So Hong Kong type literally means a type produced in Hong Kong, as there were Berlin type, which was produced in Berlin back in the 19th century. So back then, actually, foundries have already been trying to speed up the production by modularizing the radicals. The concept is logical, but the execution was horribly done, as the characters sharing the same radical could have dramatically different proportions. In comparison, Hong Kong type is far more mature, as Samuel Dyer insists to cut each character one by one to achieve the best quality possible. So Hong Kong type was designed into two sizes, into number 2, which is a display purpose type. It's approximately 10 millimeter, and which is around 30 point. And number 4, which is body text, and which is approximately 6 millimeter, and which is around 60 point. To be honest, from today's perspective, since we are very used to highly standardized design, Hong Kong type, which was produced 165 years ago, might look ungainly, inconsistent, and even anachronistic. It was supervised by experts and produced by craftsmen from various backgrounds, and some might not even know Chinese. In some occasions, the radical might be totally out of balance and could have vastly inconsistent designs. And some characters even somehow manage to extrude the M square. But despite of these shortcomings, there are many aspects that we could appreciate and even to inspire today's type design. In the modern development of Chinese characters, the highly standardized structures had compromised the elegant relationships between radicals. For example, this character Meng, which means bright. The radical on the left, Yat, meaning sun, and on the right, Yu, meaning moon. In today's most commonly used fonts, the relationship between two radicals seems detached. But in Hong Kong type, the tail from the moon and extended elegantly to kind of like embracing the sun, making the character more cohesive and interconnected. And this attribute could be found in many other characters as well. For instance, for this character, Zhou, which means doing. There's a terminology called Zhonggong that describes the structures of Chinese characters. Zhonggong, which means the space occupied in the middle area of a character, which is a similar concept to counter. So traditionally, most calligraphy style pertain a very tight structure. But however, this has changed since the development of movable type when punch cartridges try to fill the space of the M square, which inevitably made the characters look wide and boxy. And at the same time made it looks less rhythmic as the silhouette of the characters became more rigid. So when type is set into paragraphs, it became block. So gradually, the norm of Chinese character loses the traditional aesthetic, loses the rhythm. When we revisit Hong Kong type, the type Zhonggong, the type counter, retains the elegance of traditional Chinese structures. There are also some subtle attributes. For example, the center axis, for example, for um, this character, Zhou, which means doing, the vertical stroke in the middle is slightly tilted. So it will become more lively. And also for this character, so one crucial element for Chinese type design are the curves. So the curves will infuse energy to the typeface. So this elegant curvature design make it look more lively and vigorous. One important attribute of metal type is the warmth. What it means is the bleeding of ink when type is pressed into the paper. And the bleed would smooth out the terminals and make it look a little bit rounded. And the strokes in general would be a little bit thicker than the original type. So one important aspect to redesign the Hong Kong type is how to interpret it. After analyzing the font, here comes the most, I came up with probably three directions to reinterpret the typeface. The first direction is to directly replicate the font as is. However, this will result in a highly inconsistent font that might be not that useful in today's context. The sole benefit might be to the preservation aspect. However, the original specimen is definitely more authentic representation. And moreover, Open Print Shop, they were planning to recast the metal type. So this direction of digital replication might be redundant. And the second direction is to amend and to fix the anachronistic defects. This entails the standardization of stroke design, to adjust the proportions and to even out the negative space. However, since the font is inconsistent, the challenge is to how to develop a standard for the entire font. We had gone through the entire specimen and picked characters that with the best craftsmanship, and using those characters as a benchmark to adjust the inferior characters. Moreover, some characters might be the design might be different from today's norm. For example, Wing, this character Wing means eternity. The dot on the top was drawn as a horizontal stroke, which is a variant commonly found in woodblock and metal type. We would preserve this kind of variant as a hint of its era. And the third direction is to design a completely new typeface that's inspired by the Hong Kong type. And this direction allows the most flexibility as it gives room for us to adjust the parameters according to today's usage. For example, I can retain the elegant composition, but also to adjust the contrast of the font. as when you apply to today's reading context, which body text is usually set around 8 to 12 point, which is around 3 to 4.5 millimeters. But the original Hong Kong type design number 4 is around 6 millimeters. So if I reduce to the size in under 5 millimeters, the contrast might be too high and make long reading stressful to the eye. So if I can redesign the weight, I might make the vertical strokes narrower. Although personally, I think the third direction is more promising in the long run. I think the second direction, which is retaining the attributes and refining the font by amendment, is more appropriate for the project. So we have drawn a few hundred characters for the exhibition design. It serves a precursor to demonstrate the possibility of Hong Kong type, that how it could rejuvenate to apply to today's context. We have also designed the visual identity for the exhibition. And although the exhibition is about heritage, we hope the design applications could be refreshing and contemporary. So this would give room for the audience to reflect how heritage could stimulate today's design. So last month, one of the Hong Kong's most significant landmark, Jumbo Kingdom Seafood Restaurant, they closed down and being towed away from the Aberdeen Harbor. And sadly, a day later, it sank in the South China Sea. This floating restaurant was featured in many movies and even animations. It was an important piece of memory for many Hong Kong people. This is also a stark reality that once again reminds us that a city's visual culture is an important element to foster cultural identity. But at the same time, this is also a paradox. It's only when the things that we were too used to began to vanish, when historical buildings being torn down to make room for more buildings, when most and almost the entire stop signs in Hong Kong being wiped out in the name of public safety, that we finally begin to know how to cherish and also to question what is Hong Kong's visual culture, what is our identity. Unfortunately, it might be a little too late, although there are a few independent concern groups that had earnestly tried to preserve the shop signs. They had too little power and resources, while the government has little interest in preservation. So when preservation is impossible, probably the only way out might be to reinvent the heritage, to create designs that not only respond to not to just be nostalgic, but to create designs that could respond to the needs of our time and also to stimulate the imagination for the future. So this is the end of my sharing, and thank you so much for listening.
Thank you so much for that great presentation, Adonian. That was absolutely fascinating. People, please drop your questions in the Q&A. I see we have a few already. I'm going to try to answer them as best I can while typing Adonian's responses. Also, you can upvote any questions that you would like to see answered first. Okay, so Adonian, are you ready for a few Q&A questions?
Sure.
Okay, let's see. Some seem to be addressing the technical aspects of the type design or the letter forms, and others are asking more about the language itself. So let's see, what do we have? Teresa Mann asks, hey Adonian, do you have any favorite resources or books to learn more about Chinese typography or just look at beautiful Chinese type?
That's a very good question. Actually, uh, a professor in Polytechnic University, Brian Koch, he has published, I guess, 2 or 3 on Hong Kong shop signs and neon lights. And it has a very complete documentation. And but actually, to be honest, I learned Chinese type design through reading Japanese type design books. Although I don't know Japanese, but I try to guess what they're saying. But yeah, I kind of flip through the book and try to learn from the graphics. Yeah, so I would recommend Brian Koch's books and also probably a few Japanese type design books.
Brian Koch, how do you spell that? I don't want to screw it up.
Brian, so and Kwok.
Kwok. Okay, got it. I want to talk to Brian about a neon tour of Hong Kong, maybe.
Wow.
Yeah, that sounds great. Brian Kwok. Okay, let's move on. Anna asks, do you have any advice on how to get connected with an international group of designers? My goal is to work abroad, Berlin, Tokyo, Hong Kong, London. All right, you go, Anna. What do you say, Adonian?
Actually, I'm trying to do the same thing as well. Do you have any advice?
Okay. Yeah. Okay, well, we'll hope for the best for you and for Anna.
Probably you could participate in type design competitions. Like I took part in New York TDC, I guess a year ago. Yeah, so yeah, probably that's one other way to do it.
That's one way to put yourself out there, right? And maybe make some contacts.
Yeah.
Okay. Good tip. Good tip. Deep T asks, what are the main elements of a typeface? In other words, technically speaking, because it would clearly not have ascenders, X height, etc. So how do you achieve a typeface identity? Is it through consistency of strokes, hooks, etc.?
Yeah. So for Chinese type design, the first element is the stroke design. Because there are many strokes, there are many horizontal strokes. So usually type designers will spend a lot of time to tackle the horizontal stroke. And it also, the terminals of the horizontal stroke usually gives the identity to the typeface. So like for me, I recognize different typeface usually through the horizontal stroke. And the second element, which is the structure, and structure in Chinese character is very tricky and would take a lot of time to adjust. So basically, there are 2 types of structures, which, as I mentioned, we usually use a term called 中宫 to describe the structure. So 中宫 is like counter. There one type of structure which is very tight, and for Zansyu, my type design, it has a very tight structure. And another type of structure is a very wide structure, which is probably a norm in the Chinese typeface in most of the Chinese typeface and also Japanese typeface in the market. So, and for the structures, the crucial aspect is how to tackle the negative space. So usually when we draw a character, we would try to balance out the negative space. So I think this this character is a very good demonstration. So as you can see, there are many horizontal strokes, but when you look closely to the negative space, you can see the negative space between the strokes are almost identical. So this is one trick to do it. But however, the tricky part is they has to look identical, but in fact, when you use a ruler to measure it, they are not really identical. Usually, the negative space closer to the base, closer to the bottom, is slightly wider. Yeah, and okay, and another aspect which is very difficult to deal with is the consistency. Because as I mentioned in one of the slides, so there are characters only with one stroke, which is one, for one. And also there are characters with many strokes. So it's very tricky and takes a lot of time to do the weight adjustments. So it will look balanced and it will have a same percentage of grayness. Yeah. And also the center axis is, we don't have X height, but we do have a vertical axis. And the vertical axis for most of the fonts is usually right in the center. But for my this type design is actually leaned to the right. So it's because it's one of the interesting attributes of Beiwei is actually slightly to the right, so it will look more lively. Yeah. So in a nutshell, these are the elements of designing a Chinese typeface.
Damn, that was a very complete explanation. I loved it. Here we have Jessica, who asks, hi, Adonian, big fan of Trilingua here. I'm originally from Taiwan and now in Los Angeles. Grendel, you can ignore my Chinese typing here. Well, yes, I can because I have no idea what it says. Can you share with us, where do you find these beautiful type specimens? I tried before and found it very hard to get my hands on them. Also, if you could recommend any resources on Chinese type design, that would be great. Thank you.
Do you mean resource on Beiwei or resource on Hong Kong type? Did she say?
She didn't clarify. And maybe she says in the Chinese that I can't read.
Okay.
All. Yeah. She says all. Okay.
As I mentioned, Brian Krog's book, or actually, if you can read Chinese, you can buy my book. Yeah, it's on Hong Kong Beiwei. So there's research and also historical background on the typeface. And for Hong Kong type, to be honest, I also have a specimen of Hong Kong type number 4, a digital copy. Yeah, because actually as we have been working on the typeface digitalization. So Open Print Shop, who initiated this project, they passed the material to us. But to be honest, there are not that many material in the market or online. But Open Print Shop, what they are doing is they try to recast the metal type in Holland. So hopefully, eventually, when they finish the casting, there will be a complete set of Hong Kong type. And I'm quite sure they will do a very complete and comprehensive documentation. So for that part, we have to wait.
Wow, that's cool. So they're recasting the original metal type.
Yeah. Oh, and another website that I will recommend is thetype.com. It's a website on Chinese typography. It's a very good and very resourceful website. The type, I guess, if I spell.
And there's also the Chinese type archive, right? The Synoptic Office is organizing that.
Yeah, definitely, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, well, we got a lot of questions now, and we only have about 15 minutes left for them. So let's see if we can burn through them. Jessica asks, it seems like traditional Chinese type design has been gaining more attention and popularity in both Hong Kong and Taiwan. What are your thoughts on the future of traditional Chinese type design And how would it interact with simplified Chinese and its type design? Similarly, it seems like many traditional Chinese would look into kanji for reference. Do you have thoughts on that?
Yeah, actually, it's a very promising future for Chinese type design because to produce a Chinese typeface, average it will cost around almost $1 million Hong Kong dollars because we have to hire like 2 to 5 designers and take a year to produce. So there are several crowdfunding platforms in Taiwan that supports the crowdfunding process for typeface, and like Just Font in Taiwan, and my friend Julius, who recently he was very successful in the crowdfunding for his typeface Hong Ming Chiu. So these type of crowdfunding, they indeed support the independent type designers. So regarding traditional and simplified Chinese, it's quite tricky. Personally, I read traditional Chinese and a little bit of simplified Chinese, but it's a little bit of challenge for me to design simplified Chinese as there are a lot more negative space involved. So I think it will take time to reinterpret traditional Chinese typeface into a simplified Chinese typeface. Yeah, and also for like my friend's typeface, Julius typeface Kumingqiu, they also incorporate kanji into the typeface. So hopefully this typeface could be used in not only in the Chinese market, but also in the Japanese market as well.
Okay, super. So did you say $1 million Hong Kong dollars? Is that what you said? Okay. Oh man. Okay, keep upvoting those questions that you want to see answered. We've got one from Harant. Harant says, since Hong Kong has dual English Chinese influence, have you noticed any signage where one writing system has influenced the other? Great question.
Yeah. This is a very interesting topic on bilingual typesetting. And my teacher back in university, Keith Tam, he has done a lot of research on bilingual. So in Trilingual's project, we have to, well, actually for most designers in Hong Kong, we have to deal with bilingual typesetting quite a lot, actually most of the times. And one, I guess, tricky part is how to do how to balance out the weight and size. Because when we do typesetting, if we use the same font size, usually the Chinese will look slightly bigger than the English. So one treatment we do, we will slightly reduce the size. And also, we will have a different way to do the leading. We will not use this identical leading for the English and the Chinese. And also, for applications, well, if we speak of Beiwei or Zansyu, we can see a lot of applications that use the Zansyu gigantic shop size, and also usually they use a smaller English at the bottom. And one interesting observation is that usually back in the days, they would use English. I think it's a handwritten font, but it's very geometrical. So it has a very big contrast to the Beiwei, because Beiwei has a lot of curves. It's very energetic, but the English typeface is very geometric and very rigid. So this contrast actually creates, I think, one interesting identity to how to juxtapose the characters together. And another observation is we can also see Beiwei apply in some government buildings. But when they apply Beiwei into those buildings, usually the font size is very small. And they will have a very huge tracking. And this spacing actually gives a lot of actually makes Beiwei looks elegant, and I think it's a very interesting way to how to do typesetting for Beiwei. Because for Chinese, we like to have a relatively close tracking, but for I don't know, for governments, or probably they were designed by foreigners, so they have a very wide tracking. So yeah.
That is super interesting. These little details.
I wish I can have photos of those examples.
Yeah, it's cool to get into the little details on this. Rena, who's one of our Type West students, asks, what are your opinions on, or do you have any knowledge about the history or construction of Latin letters that accompany CJK fonts, Chinese, Japanese, Korean, specifically that wonky, unique looking serif font in Ming Ti Song Ti? Thank you. Love the webinar.
For typeface, for example, my friend's typeface, Julius typeface, Hong Mingqiu. So what he is doing now, usually we will not design our own Latin typeface, because we're not, to be honest, we are not expert in Latin typeface. If you ask me to draw one, it would be horrible. So we would outsource the design. And for my Julius typeface, he actually commissioned Klim Type from New Zealand, to draw the Latin for him. So I guess one important aspect to draw the Latin is, of course, as the balance. I mean the weight of the strokes, so as to look visually balanced. But to be honest, it's impossible to look identical in terms of weight, because it's two different structures. But what we try to do is try the best to balance out the weight. And to be honest, for my typeface Zansyu, I'm still pondering which foundry to commission the Latin typeface.
Still looking, huh? Okay, aspiring type designers. You're competing with Klim though, so that's gonna be tough. Okay, let's see. Oh my God, it's 7:21. Few more questions here. Let's see. Adrienne asks, can you talk a little bit about the design scene in Hong Kong? Is there a strong design community? And I would add, is there a strong type design community?
I would say it's getting stronger. Yes, there were not, well, in Hong Kong, we don't have a type design curriculum. So I kind of learned type design along the way when I was studying in Polytechnic University, but most of the time I kind of have to self-taught myself after I graduated. But yes, the community is getting stronger. And recently there's a group called Type Club, which is founded by graphic designers, type designers, and even artists. So hopefully the group would foster a stronger community, and hopefully they would host more type-related events. And regarding the graphic design scene, actually, I think there's a pretty close relationship. First of all, Hong Kong is a very small place and a very small market. So basically, everyone knows one another. So we have a good relationship, but we often would do gatherings, but the gatherings will often is not design related. We just drink a lot. We just have fun, because I guess that's one way to release the stress from work. Yeah.
But surely ideas are burbling up during these meetings, not just the bubbles in the beer, right?
And also, there's another organization called Design Trust, which they were able to bring together designers from different disciplines. So there are lots of architects and also product designers and also a few graphic designers. So they occasionally would do projects that involving public space or the government. So it's a very interesting mix of designers.
That sounds great. I bet some cool ideas come out of that, right? Okay. Blake asks, how does China's crackdown on political expression in Hong Kong relate to choices about type? Is the Hong Kong style of writing or type associated with a political point of view? And if so, how?
I will have a very, very simple response, and you will know. To be honest, I would not try to not give any response because anything would be quite risky in Hong Kong right now. So
okay, I kind of figured it would be a little type of a question there. So we'll just have to infer. Thanks, Adonian. We don't want to get you in trouble. Okay. Let me just add anything. Okay. Adonian will give no response. Okay. Adrienne asks, what are some of your considerations when creating bilingual design, especially when it comes to creating both the Chinese and English versions of a logo? Is there a difference in your approach when creating Chinese only designs versus English only or bilingual design?
Yeah, that's a very good question. Yeah, indeed, we will have a totally different approach when we just to design the Chinese alone, or when we have to design both the English and Chinese. So when we have to tackle both language, we would, especially in for a logo type, we would try to, or the client would usually demand for some kind of graphic or visual clues that will be consistent in both the Chinese and English. But this is actually quite a tricky and request, because if we messed up, it will look like those Chinese takeaway box where you can find those Chinese-inspired Latin typeface. Yeah, but it's a very tricky way to deal with both English and Chinese. So what we would do is we will introduce a shared element. However, that element will not to be overtly Chinese or English. It will be a merely graphical treatment that make both language look consistent. Actually, right now I'm working on a logo type for a dessert company, cake shop logo type. So I was using a same element for both the English and Chinese logo type. But hopefully, I will able to share in our website in the future after we complete the design. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Let's see if we can get one more question in before we have to sign off. Yun, who is another Type West student, I believe, if it's the correct Yun, asks, does the language or grammar not like to use adjectives or adverbs? Instead of saying a lot of or many, why repeat the noun multiple times in a character? Perhaps that's referencing the dragon.
Yeah.
Yeah. The flying dragon or whatever it was that we saw earlier.
Yeah, I guess he's. Yeah, for this one. Yeah, it's a really like for this character Yim, which there's three characters of fire fall. So I think it means flame. So that's a very interesting question, and to be honest, I'm not sure how to respond. But I guess there are many multiple ways of how ancestor they invented the characters. So sometimes they do have adjectives, but sometimes they would just create their own the entirely new character. And actually, if we have this, actually, I think back in the university when I was studying visual communication, my project actually, in fact, to invent new Chinese characters based on this idea. Yeah. Because there's a character in called Sao, which is using Tao and Sum, which is autumn, and a heart to describe a downcast emotion. And I was intrigued by this character, and I was thinking, is it possible to use different seasons to describe an emotion? So I invented characters that combine summer and the heart, and the winter and the heart, etc. So I've designed a new characters based on this idea. But anyways, this is an interesting question, and probably we should continue to invent new characters to describe different things and new technologies or new emotions.
Okay, Adonian, I think we are going to have to sign off, but we have one last question. It's from Stephen Coles. And he asks, what is the best way to get your book outside of Hong Kong? Can we buy it directly from you?
Yeah, you can drop me a line, and I can try to get you a copy.
Okay.
But it's in Chinese though.
It's in Chinese. Well, it's got pretty pictures, right?
A lot of pictures there.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much, Adonian. That was fantastic. And thank you everybody for joining us today for this amazing lecture. And we will see you again in just a couple weeks for our next Letterform lecture. In the meantime, wear your mask, stay safe, and stay healthy. Thank you so much, Adonian.
Thank you so much.
Yay.